Disabled people have had enough. We've been waiting patiently for years. Those in the position to make a difference need to mean business. No significant change is going to happen otherwise.
I want everyone to just be equal for once.
It has to be thought through. You've got to think of every member of society. And I don't think we're taking into account wheelchair users.
I guess it's about making things equal and not discriminating against people.
Hi, I'm Charlotte, and today I'll be exploring accessibility in the UK and the impact it has on people's lives. I have Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease and recently have found the world in a wheelchair and out to be a lot more complicated than it may seem. So I wanted to truly see if the UK is accessible physically and online for the estimated 60 million people that are disabled around the UK. Accessibility is split normally into two parts: web accessibility and physical accessibility. Web accessibility is the practice of creating websites or online tools that are usable to anyone regardless of disability or impairment. According to Userway, a digital accessibility innovator, only 3% of the internet is accessible to those with disabilities. This needs to change. Physical accessibility refers to physical places such as buildings and outdoor areas. It makes sure that people with mobility issues or people who are wheelchair users are able to get from A to B without having issues.
It's obviously very important that everyone has an equal opportunity to enjoy every aspect of life, and just if you've unfortunately either been born with a disability, whether it be physical or learning difficulty, why should you suffer basically and not be able to enjoy life as everyone else can? Discrimination Act in 1985 came out. So that was the first main documentation that started the modern sort of way we treat discrimination. But then in 2010, that's changed to the Equalities Act, hasn't it? From the European Union got involved. So again, it's changed, but our main regulations that guide us for building new buildings are the building regulations, which are a guidance note. They are a way of, a suggested way, if you follow them, that you can comply with building regulations.
Cloverleaf Advocacy is an independent charity allowing people with disabilities and learning difficulties to have a say in accessibility and issues around their area. I went to a meeting of Thursday's Voice, run by Cloverleaf, to discuss with two of the members about the importance of accessibility and the impact it has on their daily lives.
Hi, my name's Julie Gunn. I'm a retired social worker, but I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's. So I then started doing some voluntary work with Cloverleaf Advocacy, and I've been doing that for a few years. Accessibility, I suppose everybody's got definitions. Basically, it covers getting from transport and also access to facilities and groups. It's important that I keep going as far as I can, and Cloverleaf's been very supportive with that.
People like us must be able to get around easy enough and access a lot of things.
So as my disabilities have increased, access has become more difficult. Parking is a particular problem, and trying to get parked near the town centre can be quite difficult. Just thinking of disabled parking and parking for people with severe disabilities.
Regarding transport, it is accessible. I just wish the doorways had come down to the platform level instead of use them ramps going up and coming down, because you've got to come down backwards when you're getting out, you know. And I just wish they'd built trains for it accessible to the platform.
So it's like step-free access?
Step-free, yeah. If I prefer, if I went to places like that, I prefer somebody with me.
Now, I had a period of 6 months where I couldn't get any transport, and it has been an ongoing problem, but taxi drivers don't want to lay out the money, basically. It's all down to finance. Obviously, people who don't drive like me would benefit from more public transport, but it's just not there. As a group, this group, we've done quite a lot of issues on transport and access, and it always comes down to we can't afford it.
But is that, no, that's not accessible. When is it ever going to be done, you know?
We have had some successes with different projects. We would like to be involved more, but we need to get more people involved as well.
It's got better, yeah. Yeah, it has got better. There's still a few things that need doing, like for accessibility and stuff.
Because people are fed up of nothing happening.
As part of this documentary, it is right for me to put to the test accessibility in local areas. I spent a few days gathering evidence of accessibility in a local area in Barnsley. On my walks, I managed to find a path with no drop curb. It is crucial for places of crossings, especially to have step-free access to the other side. Without this, people are not able to safely cross a road where they are and either have to loop back to find one or dangerously try drop into the road. Here is another definite example of inaccessibility. Stairs, but no ramp or other way to get into the park. You can't actually get into the park if you're in a wheelchair or you can't use stairs. And clearly it's not very accessible. If you manage to get all the way up this path, even though there's no ramp, you clearly can't get in here if you're in a wheelchair. This is to prevent motorcycles coming into the park, but it also prevents people in wheelchairs coming up into the park. Equipment is just one of the many things wrong with accessibility. Here, there's no park equipment that people in wheelchairs or people with mobility issues may be able to use. This entire part that children should be able to enjoy means that they can't, all because of one thing: accessibility. On a similar note, while investigating, I found an alarming number of drop curbs and or paths covered by cars, bins, gates or motorcycles. While convenient for someone else, it means that people with pushchairs, walking sticks or wheelchairs can't get past, so have to maybe go out their way to find accessibility, which shouldn't have to happen. Gates, bins, cars or anything else that can obstruct a path to be placed with enough room for anyone to be able to get past. I wanted to speak to Alex Barker, a disability consultant at AbilityNet, to see what he thought about web accessibility and its importance. Web accessibility is such a massive spectrum, but in a nutshell, what would you say that web accessibility is?
Good web accessibility benefits everybody. So you've got to think about the sort of people that might be accessing your website. Depending on how your website is designed, you can be making it really, really hard for someone to actually access what they need. If your website is not accessible, A, you'll get someone complaining, and B, they will go somewhere else. Disabled people have got quite a large spending ability. If your website's not accessible, they will go to another competitor whose website is accessible. It's all about making a real commitment to building in accessibility right at the start and saying, we want everybody to access our website. Here's how we're going to do it. You've got to build it in right from the start. You've got to make it an integral part of what you do. I would suggest to people that they do a bit of research. There's some great resources. If you are designing a website, don't just assume that it's going to be accessible. Get some people who have got additional needs to test the website and give their feedback. Getting someone with a lived experience of disability to access a website or an app is key to getting to the stage of being informed about whether your website or app is accessible or not.
I wanted to see how the capital city fares in physical accessibility, so I decided I'm going to take a day trip to London. Our day started in Fulham, where we started to walk towards Fulham Broadway station and already encountered some problems. Trees everywhere. There were always trees covering the pavement, and it made it really hard as a wheelchair user to actually get by them. But we finally got to Fulham Broadway station and managed to find a lift and step-free access onto the train. If I was on my own, I definitely would have struggled. We got off at Blackfriars station and found still another plethora of problems near the City of London. We went to St Paul's Cathedral and figured out there was actually step-free access into the cathedral, which I thought was pretty amazing, seeing as though it was a historical building. Found a temporary drop curb, and I liked this, because even though it is temporary, they still think about accessibility, which is so important even for temporary use. Drop curbs are another big problem around the City of London. And of course it is a historic part of London, so maybe it is a bit more old-fashioned. Here I had to walk another 5 minutes out of my way just to find the drop curb that was accessible to me to get down to a place that had stairs. Now, all I wanted was some food, but it was an impossible journey that added 5 minutes, all because of accessibility, which could be added. We went to the monument, and it was only stairs, and I know that historic buildings can't be made to be accessible. There should be some temporary ways, or maybe just adjustments to make to maybe the outside of the building, just to make it a bit more accessible. We then tried to find the DLR train to get to Greenwich. Now this seemed to be an impossible task. It should be clearly labelled, but I could find no labelling to make sure that there was step-free access, and every time I tried to get to the tube, it would be stairs. It should be marked to say that it is step-free and disabled friendly to anyone, so that people don't get confused in trying to find the DLR station, like we did. I found the DLR to be step-free access as well, which meant that I could easily get on and off without problems. It wasn't too bumpy either. However, if I was on my own, I actually might struggle, as sometimes you need a lot of momentum just to get on and off the train. We then went to the Cutty Sark, and I found this not to be accessible. Although there were some lifts that said staff only, this should be used maybe for disabled people in mind. All in all, I found my journey to the City of London to be informative to my search of accessibility. I found out that on my own I would have struggled a lot, depending on what type of wheelchair I had, what my mobility struggles were. The historic part of London actually is quite accessible, apart from a few obvious things which I think should be improved. But now, back to Barnsley. From investigating the accessibility in London, I realised there is a long way to go in terms of making things inclusive, especially because information about the accessibility of areas is information impossible to get hold of. That's where Sociability comes in.
So we're essentially a mobile app that helps disabled people find information about the accessibility of places, particularly local hospitality and retail venues. So the idea is that anyone can go to a venue and upload information about that venue to help other people in the community. Accessibility is more than just compliance with regulations. It needs to be functional for disabled people, and it also needs to be inclusive. Businesses, we often say the first step is actually just communicating what exists, and particularly because the type of information we collect is really objective. It's not a sort of values assessment of whether they're doing, well or poor in a space. It's not about giving them a rating or a score. It's just about explaining what a person will find. The second thing is obviously in terms of improving their accessibility, we encourage businesses to really think about providing different options to customers. There isn't a sort of perfect accessible design that if a business just did these 5 things, it would be perfect for any disability. Very often there's things that work for one disability that actually are problematic for another disability. And so I think the best way for people to have more accessible spaces is to create spaces with more variety. On the specific point of whether or not disabled people are being involved in the design process, the short answer is no. I don't think they are very frequently, and if they are, it's not efficient. On the broader point of whether the UK is inclusive and accessible, it's definitely got good parts to it, and I think there's a lot of people who've been a lot more focused in the UK on how to be more proactively inclusive and accessible. But no, it's not a space that is kind of widely accessible to disabled people. Once that shifts and the disabled access becomes something that people proactively think about creating, then the UK will be a much more inclusive and accessible space.
Change is happening all around us, whether positively or negatively, and the UK is finally starting to see that things need to be more accessible. I and many others will look forward to the positive changes in the future for those 60 million people to truly see if the UK is actually accessible.